Hey y'all, I'm Kelly Moody and you're listening to the Ground Shots podcast, an audio project exploring our relationship to ecology through conversations and storytelling with farmers, herbalists, craftspeople, naturalists, artists, and more.
Lots of locust cedar splits, I offer sweat and splinters. Forest elders breathe their last, I'll bring them for your supper.
Hey y'all, it's Kelly. Welcome to the Ground Shots podcast. This episode of the podcast features a conversation with John Mahkewa. John is a Hopi-Tewa elder, and I met him a couple years ago at the Buckeye Gathering, which is an ancestral skills gathering that happens in California. I don't believe it's actually happened since we first met because of the campfire that went through and other reasons. So John and I met there, and I took John's pottery class over a course of a few days, and throughout that time I got to know him a little bit and hear some of his stories. And I actually did a field recording of some of John's stories from that time, and I still have it, and I haven't put it out there yet, and there won't be any of that field recording in this interview with John, but probably at some point in the future I will do something with those other stories. Perhaps maybe John and I will meet in person at some point, and he can fill in some blanks from that recording. For this particular interview with John and this episode, we did a conversation over the computer, and I felt compelled to go ahead and finally get some stories of John's out there because he's been totally willing to talk for the podcast for a while now. I just have been attached to doing it in person again. But now that COVID is a reality and I'm not traveling as much this year, I just decided to go ahead and talk to John online, and it was really an awesome conversation, and so I'm happy to share that with y'all here. John is a potter and an artist and a storyteller, and so we speak to all of those things in this conversation. And most specifically, we talk about John's experiences as a young child hanging out with his grandmother, who is Grace Trapella. She was an acclaimed potter, and some things he learned from her and how she used clay to tell stories. John speaks to his death experience in a Jewish hospital after a heart attack over 20 years ago, and how this experience changed his perspective on the world and reinvoked his interest in clay. And he told this story to me and other folks in the pottery class a few years ago, so he kind of retells it a little bit on the podcast. John speaks to clay as a teacher and how he processes the clay by hand with no electric machines and tools. And I know in our class he spoke about this a lot more than he speaks to this on air, but just I think he told us he's never really worked with clay with any kind of electric machines, or doesn't ever fire with electric kilns or anything like that. So it was pretty cool seeing how he does it without all of those things and hearing why he doesn't. We talk about the DNA connection between clay and humans. John talks about reaching out into new art forms and branching beyond traditional techniques in most recent years. John shares some wisdom about his perspective on the pandemic and the recent protests and riots. And finally, we speak to some of John's writing projects that he has in the works. And before we air this conversation with John Mahkewa, I wanted to remind y'all that we have a Patreon for the podcast, and this is the primary way that we fund this project, and pretty much the only way we fund this project is very necessary to keep this going. So if you want to support the Ground Shots podcast, you can go to patreon.com/ofsedgeandsalt. The link to that is in our show notes, and you can also do a one-time donation through PayPal as well, which is also linked in the show notes of every episode. And any amount of support monthly really helps us keep this project going and be able to kind of project into the future how much we can do each month. I, Kelly Moody, don't pay myself, but I do pay a sound engineer, and I pay for the subscriptions that are required to run a podcast through this pool of money. And it would be great to have more support so that we can not be kind of doing this on a shoestring, and I can also get some more help because I do a lot of this myself, finding the music and doing the interviews and a lot of the editing process. And more funding would definitely help me out and also allow us to put out more episodes. So with that, let's go ahead and get to this conversation with John Mahkewa. Please do enjoy these stories from John and his wisdom, and happy listening, y'all.
Logs of locust cedar splits, I offer sweat and splinters.
That blue or red or whatever color I'm looking at. It's really interesting.
And you haven't had that before?
Well, unfortunately, when I was taught to paint, when it comes to pottery, there was a meaning for every color, line. And so for years, I was kind of like blocked in earth tone colors. And everything I did had to have like a meaning. In other words, I also had to have a certain thought when I was painting and all that kind of stuff. So since I met you, I've been breaking all the taboos. I've been doing pottery at night. I won't do that one because the lady that told me that one was blind.
Uh-oh.
She said she got blind because she did pottery at night.
Wow.
But I've been breaking all the taboos. So so just within the last maybe 3 months, well, I had this, I'll just say a dream that kind of shifted my consciousness to where I was wanting to be able to describe my feelings of frequency and vibration, because that's where the key is at. And how do you tap into that, where you can own it? And just by manipulating pitches and breath and sound, how you can, manifest things. My garden, the backyard, which I'm letting get overgrown right now, is I visualized everything I had here, and sooner or later, the plants that I visualized through friends or even ex-wives brought me the plants that I visualized, And I thought that was cool, but in the last 3 months, I'm actually feeling and visualizing the intention that it took, especially the ex-wives, to bring that stuff to me. And it puts a whole different feeling to it. Like maybe I'm seeing, like you do through plants, that they really are alive. They breathe, that whole process. And they have a voice.
Yeah, and at different times they speak to you in different ways. They sometimes know when to speak to you too, and when not to.
Right.
Well,
most of my insight comes through dreams, and that's how all this 3 months ago I just really awakening. It wasn't even like a shift. It's just like woke up and saw what was really out there.
Well, John, do you want to go ahead and get started? And I already started recording just because I have to do a screen recording for this to make it work. And maybe you could start by introducing yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, good morning. I believe it's Wednesday. My name is John Mahkewa, and I'm so grateful and honored to be on Kelly's podcast here. I think we met about couple of years ago at Buckeye Gathering, I believe. And so I'm Hopi native. I'm 65 years old. I'm a grandfather, a great-grandfather. And I'm a bit of a muse and a storyteller. And so I appreciate having the opportunity to share, I think, the reality of my life experience, and that's totally what I call it. So although I'm native, I'm open to all forms of cultures and ideologies and religions and whatever it takes to tap into I think that the one thing that connects us is human nature, and how that human nature reacts or reacts with nature. So I live in Yuma, Arizona.
Cool. We met. You were teaching a pottery class at Buckeye, and I really appreciated during the class how you told a lot of stories each day too. I remember it started off with a big class, and every day got a little smaller, and by the end it was like maybe like 6 of us.
Yeah, I was going to say 7. Yeah, it was small.
And it's just, you were speaking like, you notice who will stick with it, just like how the clay will teach you things.
Right.
You told a lot of stories during that class about your childhood growing up, hanging out with your grandmother, and I was always really fascinated by that, and you learning pottery from her. Would you like to speak a little bit to that?
Well, I've been asked to write a story about my grandmother along with these other individuals, and hopefully it's going to become a book. So I've been asked to write a chapter about her. And the opening, I guess, paragraph would be like, I don't remember. All I remember is I remember the first time I met her. And that was probably about the age of 7. I might have met her before that. I don't recall. But I know just before I contracted polio, I was 6 or 7. And then I spent 3 years of my life in a hospital, so I didn't see her till maybe 10 or 11. And so I vaguely remember meeting her with that young age. But when I came to re-meeting her after I got out of the hospital those 3 years, I remember we got in a line, I and my brothers and sisters. And when it came to me, she said to me, "Navi Saya." In other words, you're here now in the flesh, because she always saw me there from the very first time she met me. So that's the type of woman she was. And she didn't really say that to, if I recall, to my other brothers and sisters, maybe my older siblings, but I don't recall my younger ones. And so that first time I met her, I knew there was something different about the relationship I was going to have with her. And as it turned out, she became my teacher. And everything from how to speak, how to present yourself, she used clay to mold and shape any story she told me. Like if one day I was after we collected some clay, and the next day I'd have to go in there and break it up. And if I was angry and if I was hitting that clay too hard, she would correct me. You're being too rough with it, or, don't take your anger out the clay. And when I didn't, she had me take one of her polishing stones, and on an old piece of wood, she had me rub that polishing stone as hard as I could to make that anger polish her stone. And so that's kind of like whatever she taught me, there was always some type of nature connection. She told a lot about the future. And, until I was about 14 or 15, I would spend, some winters in the summer times with her. And during those short times, sometimes they were all summer, I would always be with her in her pottery shed. And if I recall, there was no one was really invited into that place, but I. And so, I think where my, if there's some type of core fiber in me, then I learned it off of my grandmother. who was a very strong, the matriarch of our family, and a well-known potter.
What's her name?
Grace Chappella. And you can Google the name, and she's in the Arizona Historic Women's Hall of Fame for cultural and art. Very well-known potter.
You told some stories at the gathering of going to collect clay with her, and I feel like I remember one you told about her having to tie strings to your feet or something so you don't fall.
Right.
But I never forgot that.
I think that story has come from my ankle to my big toe.
Yeah.
But yes, out on the Hopi res, the clay grows in layers. And so, you have all these sandstone blocks basically held together by clay. And so she had like a little mine. And it wasn't very far, maybe 10, 15 feet into the overhanging cliff, depending on where you're at, 200 to 300, sandstone blocks above you. And so it's just barely enough room to climb in there, crawl in there on my stomach, and then with like a screwdriver, break the clay off and put it in a Rex Lard. It was a red Rex Lard can. So the lid went on tight, and she had a string tied to that too. So she would pull it out, put it in her gunny sack, and then I would pull it. Anyway, it would be like 30 or 40 pounds of clay, that process, right? And she did tie a string or a rope around me. Like I said, it's anywhere from my neck to my ankle to my big toe. So that, if something happened, she could hopefully pull me out or at least they would know where I was at. Because from previous experience, one of my, and I believe it was her sister, actually got killed when, the mine caved in on her while collecting clay. But yeah, she would put all that, in that Rex Lard can, because it would start off really early in the morning because she didn't want people to know where her vein was at. So, the sun was even out. And so by the time we got to the mine, it was time to eat. So she had packed a meal in that same, red Rex Lard can. So we ate, and then we used that same bucket to bring the clay out of the mine. And I'm telling you, she was already in her 50s, already had been in an accident, blind in one eye, using a cane, coming down that mesa, man, with that whole 30 or 40 pounds of clay on her head, in the back coming down. And I'm walking in back with her with that little red lard can and the rope. And we'd be coming back down, about 11 o'clock in the morning. So it was really a secret place. And even when I started teaching, her style, one of my relatives said, I was giving away her secrets. And if you know her history, she was one of the first potters that actually started teaching and showing and going to different exhibitions and teaching her pottery. And so I wrote back to my relative who I said, well, tell me where her clay mine's at. And so I never got a response after that because no one knew but me.
You're like, share something, but not everything.
Because she was sharing. She always shared, Mm-hmm. And so I always felt like I was just sharing. That's why I don't really charge for the class, but I do charge for the clay.
Mm-hmm. I think I remember you saying that you, at least when I first met you, that you didn't have any grandchildren yet, or children that were especially interested in clay to pass on knowledge to. Has that changed since? One
of my grandsons took a short interest in it. But no, none of them really, to be honest with you. And I don't force it on them, really, I don't. I've gotten ridicule about that, but they're their own beings. And I just have to trust, like my grandmother, mind you, they'll be around, they watch, they'll see, they know, like, even like when they were young, I taught them how to plant seeds. And they'll come out and tell me, years later, what I did to get that corn or those tomatoes to grow. So I just have to trust that, that as in my case, although I did see that sit under her, it wasn't, some 20 years later when I picked up the clay again and started working it. And I could actually hear her, whispering to me. Mm-hmm. So, and because my grandmother never really told me that, I was going to become, a potter. But she did say when I start carving dolls, and she was referencing Kachina dolls, to do them old style. Don't make them look like a human, because they're not supposed to be human. So when I do make them, I make the old school way.
Mm-hmm. I think I remember you speaking to how you had a time in your life where you were taught by her at an early age, and then you didn't really do pottery for a long time. And I think I remember you telling about a experience, like a near-death experience, and then after that you got interested in the pottery again, and it kind of came back to you.
Right. That was, as a matter of fact, that was 20 years ago last March.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know I sent some documents that I wasn't supposed to public speaking or write a book until 20 years later, because the special team that pronounced me dead and came back, they were a bunch of old doctors, and they figured they'd be dead and the practice would be over 20 years from now. So anyway, they didn't charge me, if I signed this document, which I did. But yeah, that would be 20 years ago, and prior to that death, I had just got through raising 3 of my youngest children. Their mother just took them back, and I felt really alone. But long story short, I was in Florida, and I had a heart attack real late at night, like 12 o'clock, and he got taken to a Jewish hospital and died in the emergency room. And then some 70 some odd hours later, because it was a Jewish hospital, they have this custom that the body could wake back up. So unlike county morgues or other hospitals, they don't put, the formaldehyde and stuff in you right away. Apparently, it's some Jewish custom. I was told afterwards. But I woke up like, I can remember 72, 73 hours later in the morgue.
Wow.
And it was during that time when, in seconds, I saw, not even seconds. It was like a warp speed, but you could see everything happening really quick. I saw my life warp speed take me to the edge of a cliff in total darkness. And that's when I knew I had died. And that whatever, because I could see, it was going by me really fast. Like turning on a light and all of a sudden it's bright, but you're seeing everything happen really quick. That I realized I hadn't been, I was given like a key to have a good life on my grandmother, but I didn't practice it. That's about what it came down to. Even knowing that she was the matriarch of our family, when I was raising my kids, I didn't look to her strength. for me to take care of my kids as a single parent. But I thought about two of my uncles who were alcoholics and raised their kids. And I knew their kids as adults. And so I told myself, if they could do it, I could do it. So even when you would think I would go to my grandmother, she was already gone by then, but at least go to her spirit and her essence and ask for help. I didn't do it. And as it turned out, I was like ashamed that I didn't live the life that, although ashamed's not the word. I just knew that it was, I'm hearing my father tell me, there's an easy way and a hard way. And he would say, I took the hard way. And that's what I did. When she laid it out clear to me for my life, an easy way. And so when I came back because I wanted to see my children again. And it's been some 20 years, and I still look, just in the last 3 months, I'm just now starting to see the beautiful, the effervescence of color and whatnot. So I'm trusting that, I do know as I tell you stories and as I talk to my grandsons and other people that I do hear her coming out. I do hear her speaking. And so that's just what I have. I have to trust in that one way or the other. And for me, it's coming down to, if I can see that reality in nature, then it only makes me have a more heartfelt belief in what I see or practice. And she was very earth-centered. She was an earth mama for sure, my grandmother was.
In the class, you spoke a lot to the wisdom of clay, and as we were working the pots and kneading the clay before we worked the pots, and just the relationship with constantly being in tune with how the clay is reacting to our emotions or where we are and our presence and our patience and these kinds of things. And you spoke to kind of the way that clay is a teacher, and you also spoke to just slowing down and being patient and learning and letting it create itself too. And would you want to share a little bit of some of that wisdom with the podcast audience?
Well, for sure, there is a very intimate connection. And by the way, I get my own clay. It's indigenous, so and it's processed all with no power. It's just here I break it down in water. But when I was a little boy, we used to have to break it down as a flour and then mix it with water. So it's all indigenous. You could eat it. It's interesting because when I decided I wanted to get back into clay, I taught some classes here locally, and I showed the students where to get the clay, and assumingly I didn't think they would go back, but when I went back to get the clay, it was all gone practically. And I actually gave up on the site, and so I started looking for some more. But then when I really decided, I'm going to see if I can work some more clay, and I had to do it because my left hand is getting all jacked up. And so anyway, I went out to that old place that I knew that one didn't have no clay, and lo and behold, man, I found some more clay. And so when I find that clay like that, like I said, it's here, it's in a big geode, and that geode can be 12 inches, it could be, 4 feet in diameter. But you break into it like an egg, and it's just the purest clay in there. It's like you could eat it. And that's the first thing I do. And my friends that go out and help me, that's the first thing I ask them to do is taste it. You got to be familiar with a good tasting clay, and it'll let you know. And there's a story that, when we were first being formed, that we were shaped from clay. So there's this, you might say, DNA connection of memory between clay and human. And I think when you taste it, it resounds in you. And plus the other thing is that your moisture, when you taste it, is that first moisture that clay hasn't had for millions of years. But if you understand that moisture creates life, then in that short exchange of tasting that clay is encoding those millions of years in that first taste. And I don't know if I do know, like, if you find, clay that's not real old, it might have a rotten taste to it, and then later on you might find a woody taste to it, and eventually that real pure stuff is like, man, it just feels like it's all of you. That's all I can describe it. So that's the beginning of that. I'll just say that the intimate connection with the clay, and then understanding, that seed is that clay is that seed, and that if we, as I was taught, to believe we're all artisans, then that we could do something to, make that clay become productive in supporting our life. And of course, a long time ago, it was, for cooking and stuff. And then I got into creating ceremonial vessels, and then, it's just evolved from there. But so yeah, it starts off in the, the tasting of the clay. Like I said, here we go through the clay after we bring it back, and then cover the water with clay. When I was a little kid, we used to have to break it up, and then strain that 3 or 4 times. And there's a particular place, because that clay is so pure, it's almost like a silica. So there's a certain sand hill that I go and get this real fine sifted sand that's sifted through all this bush called a rabbit bush. And then even when I come here, I sift it even finer, and I mix that in that clay, and usually set for at least 9 months, and in the process of squeezing, just like my grandson, when he was out here a couple of months ago, he saw me, for a long time squeezing that clay until he decided he wanted to help me. And he was surprised how hard that clay was, and that you're really out here working. Yeah, I said, yeah, it looks like I'm playing around. I said, man, he goes, that's work. But yeah, so, adding that sand in there, which basically is, really, if anything, it's just adding more silica to it. But anyway, the longer that thing cures, 9 months, but adding to it and talking to it and putting those good feelings and thought of not even visualizing a pot, but just visualizing a clay ball, or as we are calling an egg, as you're working it. And then letting that thing, sit for 9 months. And then it has you talk to it, and I keep it where I have to water it, once or twice a week. And then I always tap it. And usually about 9 months later, even the friends who have helped me get the clay, I've taught them to listen for that tap. And when it resounds, that's when that clay is ready to work. So it's a process. It's depending on how big those chunks of clays are and how strong and you are and how much help you have. It could take a while to break down, 40, 50 pounds of clay, which is about what I get, because, I only go out there once or twice a year.
One night as I went out in the dark, I heard the frogs a-peeping, and I I'm careful. I forgot to leave a door open behind me, that I might find my way home again, home again. Under my feet, the path winding through the forest. And if I stray, blue ghosts lead the way. I forgot to leave a doll in my pocket to tell the way when I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Oh, love, where'd you go? The way is dark, I'm alone, I'm alone. I'll build a door with golden trim, follow the grain to the river. I'll forge a key of breath, unlock the past, find my way to the river. I don't know what lies behind or before me. The way is dark, but I can see. Open the door and go in. I go in.
And do you predominantly make smaller things? I remember in our class you made a lot of these little seed
Right,
vessels
because
and stuff.
at that time I know I was already having problems with my my left hand. Now it's even worse. But yes, making smaller bowls, and I have bought some incise tools so that I don't have to paint on them, but I can incise designs on them. But right now I got some serpents I'm working on and some other stuff. So that clay is actually in my little refrigerator right there. So the longer it sits, the better. And I found that the longer it sits, it tends not to crack when you're working it, and it doesn't crack when you're firing it. So I know I have a difficulty because of the lack of strength in my left hand to work a lot of air bubbles that I used to be able to work out. So I'm having to work around all those things. I'm having to not get upset at myself. I'm having to swallow a pill that same woman who told me about not making pottery at night. Like I'm telling you, she's blind when she's telling me this story. And I told her, I said to her, and I eat these words every day. That, well, you've done enough pottery. You should be able to do that blind. And I'm not blind, and I have a jacked up left hand, and it is fucking difficult. You know what I mean? So, God, yeah. But yeah, and some of the taboos that what I call taboos, they were really, like I told you earlier, like life lessons that my grandmother was trying to teach me to do clay. So what I've done since I've met you was deliberately started breaking those taboos. Like being angry when I'm breaking up the clay. You know what I mean? Thinking no good thoughts. And I started doing that because I finally started to understand what my grandmother was teaching me about was energy, and it comes down to frequency and vibration. Because if we can get out of the thought of the duality of frequency and vibration, then we allow it just to do whatever it chooses to do through us. And so I am having different forms of expression now that you'd think as an artist I would have had it a long time ago, but I'm just now starting to experience it and literally feeling it, seeing it, and wanting to try to paint it or copy it, which I had to go through, by the way, to what was taught to me as part of the craft, and I still teach that craft about the intimacy, and that could go deeper and deeper if I had clay in my hands and students around me, the whole story would change again. But because I realized that I was actually trying to do her work, and then one night in a dream she came to me and she says, don't do my work, you do your own. And so that's when I started breaking down those, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And in many ways kind of taking away excuse of not being able to do that. Because my mind was always set on bowls. But when I started just thinking about expression, now I'm thinking about little sculptures and, panels that I wouldn't have thought of doing before.
So you've ventured out into some other art forms, and maybe you've been doing this for a while, but just other kinds of media, using other kinds of mediums to express creativity.
Right. Well, I'm a real frugal man, and I like to recycle. I'm doing a series right now, and I think I'm going to call it All My Relations. But I have these palm tree branches. See, this is a palm tree branch that was cut real close to the trunk of a palm tree. Like it would be like this on the palm tree, right? So this one, I'm going to make them like a Kachina doll, but I'm also going to make it like an alien face. So can you see the outline I've done there?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an example of a series that I'm going to be doing to say not only we as humans are connected, but also that a lot of what my grandmother told me come from our star connection as well. So I'm doing this series kind of as a Kohopi, or a Kohopi is a not good Hopi or an unbalanced Hopi. That's what my aunties used to call me when I was a little boy. No good. So it's going to be like a little Hopi twist to really saying that we are related more than just this human and earth connection, but we are, descendants of the cosmos. So that is kind of like where I'm stepping out to, something like that. And it's there's an uncle that we used to call, maybe still do, called a ta'a. And a ta'a was the uncle that your dad or your mother sent you to when they couldn't answer a question or whatever. Or maybe you needed a scolding. So part of also what I'm thinking about doing is, writing little episodes called Ta'a's Tales of different life experiences I've gone through or I've helped people go through. Yeah. So doing stuff like that.
Cool. I'm curious your thoughts right now. We've had a crazy year so far. I mean, a crazy few years since we first met, but we have a pandemic that's looming over us and lots of unrest in the world. And I'm curious if you have any words of wisdom about thinking about the pandemic and thinking about all of the protests and riots that are happening, and like where you are with it.
You know, it's interesting you asked the question, because when the word that came to me was float. To learn to float. There is a quote unquote reality going on, but it's not a real reality. I think we as humans have become trained to subconsciously and maybe even consciously believe in certain myths, ideologies, and religions that are being called to question now. About 4 years ago, I was asked to give a talk, and I talked about the seeds. What kind of seeds do you have enough? What quality of seeds are you carrying? And are those seeds light enough, in other words, sacred enough to bloom in unseen thought or flower? And I'm saying that because we don't want to go back to, even though we might have heirloom roses, this is a time where we go on that heirloom and allow something else greater, because we don't want to keep duplicating something we might think is good for us. Some old stories, and that's one of the reasons why I deliberately broke those taboos, because in many ways that they helped my life, they also really fucked up my life. But it was, and see, I can laugh about it because I've learned how to float above all those things. I have disconnected with the, the illusion of having a personality, and then being taught, whether we know it or not, to live and manifest that personality, or whoever we think that person is in this unusual reality that we're in. That's why we're having such a hard time in our inner core selves, with especially with enlightened beings, of totally seeing what's happening. And at least in my case, I don't want to be another talking head. I want to see action. So this is why I'm using the analogy of a rose. I don't want to see the same rose. I want to see a different rose. I don't care how good that rose is. I'll take a weak, innocent-looking fresh rose and a mature, ripe, beautiful, red American. So in that floatingness, I think there is the character or the virtue of trust. Just like every day, I know the sun's going to come up, and if that sun comes up, I know the heat rays off that sun is going to create some type of dryness or moisture or wind, and that's a trust that I know it's going to happen. Just like I know here in the Southwest, 11 o'clock, man, boom, temperature shoots up. 11 o'clock. 5, 6, depending on what August. It shoot up, 8 degrees. Boom, 11 o'clock, it's jumped. So I've been having to go through my seed bowl, my seed pack, and holding out and seeing if it really can stand the test of time. And although when I call that seed, I'll call that seed a truth. And that truth brought me this far, to this realization. So I don't take truth, throw it into a fire, but I just toss it back to where it came from. That maybe one day that truth will become somebody else's truth, and take on a whole different flower, if you will, and to hold that person the truth till however long that person needs it. So in a way, I haven't killed anything or put any weight on on the truth that I held. I can only say that if I live that to its highest good, then it's only going to enable the person that it falls on to live their highest good as well, because I practiced it to its fullest. So that's my expectation of being able to really look at ourselves with, it might even be our name, but look at ourselves and see who we are, and then claim that person, become the life breath of all those seeds you still carry. And it might even come back down to, 4 or 5 virtues that you were born with, but somewhere or the other, through education, through parents, through whatever, might have been suppressed. And I think when you find those seeds, we find that we don't need a lot. And then I think it opens up to be more receptive to, I think, what I'm experiencing now, the more fullness of, what I've, because of my teachings, been allowed to express themselves. So I'm feeling like we should float, rise above what's going on right now. I don't speak about what's happening because to me, this is not my planet. I know Mother can take care of herself. There was a number of prophets who said that I'm only visiting this planet. But because of, however, the cultures and stuff, we're taught ownership and then attachment. And if we get attachment, then we've got to play by them rules. And so, float. I hope that makes some sort of sense.
Yeah, it does. Totally. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people with different opinions about, the pandemic is one thing, and then like the unrest in our world is another, and the pandemic has its own wisdom of floating, trying to understand a different way of having to be in the world, and then the unrest is sort of a necessary upheaval, but also some people's way of dealing with being oppressed or suppression and all these things, and yeah, it's just our world. It's kind of in a crazy place right now, but I do hear what you're saying. The float, the moving through it with grace is a really important thing.
Yeah, I think the other part of that too is to where we can really see, even though we've led to believe or evolved to a higher form of consciousness, the mass majority of the human nature still is. And I've had friends that I've held in high esteem that are just totally taken away by something that we should have just floated above. So yeah, we just try not to buy in, and I think we can only negate whatever we consume too. That's the other part. What we're exposing ourselves to. Because all that has, our brain is tapped into that, whether we know that or not, how to perceive what they're telling us through the news, colors, all those things that they use to manipulate us to. So, just to, like you're doing, just keep moving forward and doing what you can. And to know and understand that it's a light. And believe me, in what's going on right now, even if it's a dim light, it's a bright light out there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's like, just like the sun is the star, but we're trillions and trillions of miles away. It's just a tiny little light. But to us, it's bright. And I just truly believe if we go into and find out who we are and what our own expectations are. And right now, if you understand confusion and chaos, well, I see that as, a time for imagination and creativity.
John, do you have any other stories you want to share right now? And yeah, anything else that I might not know about or be able to prompt you? And yeah, anything you want to share as we kind of go towards the end of this conversation?
Well, not really, but I would like to. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but years ago I used to teach this program called the study of self, and it was SOS, the old SOS distress. So I am kind of thinking about writing a little manual about that, about learning how to appreciate the day, start your day, and to become present with yourself, and in one way or the other, bring into connection, this illusionary self and the core that we are born with, and in some way bind them together, almost like making peace with ourselves. Matter of fact, I had a symbol designed, and the symbol was these two arrowheads pointed together, because whenever people came together for conversation or peace, they put those arrowheads together. So that's one thing I'm kicking around. Yeah. And in essence, it would teach you how to float.
Mm-hmm. So you have some writing projects you're working on, and it seems like you have some new sculptural, artistic projects you're working on. And
yeah, I have, like I said, those series of palm things. And I have a friend of mine we're writing stories about grandmas. So I'm going to have a little chapter in there about her. And just trying to hang loose, try to bear the pain that I got, that I'm living with right now. Mm-hmm. And just trying to stay afloat, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you seem like very vibrant, and that you're still doing the things you love, and it's good to see that.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward for this pain to subside, because right now I need a shot of tequila.
Yeah.
Because it hurts. Yes. And I didn't have any tequila this morning because I wanted to be straight up. But I'm feeling it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, John, for.
But that's that's how I have to deal with my pain: herb and tequila. Now I do have tramadols, but I don't like to take. When the pain gets really bad, I do that. But
you have back pain, and you also had a stroke at one point, right?
Exactly. That's almost been 4 years ago now, I think.
I think I remember in our class you had told us that you had recently had one. And
okay, because I was thinking when I first met my friend Marietta, and that was 4 years. Yeah, about 5 years ago. Yeah, somewhere around there. I have and a couple of months ago too, I fell, so I have like a cracked rib, and that bastard hurts too. But just like I said, the other aches and pains are just, like my grandson says, you're just getting old, Pop.
Old body, but youthful spirit.
Yes. So all I have is hope. Not even hope. I'll say trust. And I can only say that whatever I learned, I have to act and be like my grandmother, because somewhere in there she knew that what she was sharing was going to get out.
Do you still have dreams with her?
I haven't had any lately. The last one I had with her was when she came to me and she was standing in back of me, and I was at a different table. I used to have a glass table, and I saw the reflection in the glass, and that's when she came to the right side. Normally she'd have been on the left. She came to the right side and said, "You don't have to do my work, do your own." It was something like that. "Don't copy me, or do your own work, don't do mine," something like that. But right away I got the impression that with all those stories that she told me, that I could go into detail about texture and taste and smell and what it was like to be creating a tiny egg, and that turned out to be a bigger egg, and the experience of working through clay is the only way a man will know what it would be like to have a baby. All those things. So now I just look at a piece of clay and try to figure out what I can do, and just go from there. But thank God I got these other stuff that I could do. Mm-hmm. But I also now see the value of, something that I can sell around here to my friends for $40, and that same piece $160 or $200 somewhere else. I see that now, because I can see that my abilities are getting a little weaned out, as you might say. So I see something that's more almost like sacred than artistic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm really struggling to make it, but still trying to not overmake it.
I'm sorry I didn't get to see you at Winter Count this year. I was told by someone that you were trying to get there, but then just couldn't make it at the last minute.
Well, I wasn't feeling that well anyway, but a friend of mine who was going to drive me there, we got so far out of town, and those are brakes or something in the front. My passenger side wheel almost came off.
Oh, God.
And so that was down the drain. But, yeah. Drink plenty of water.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, John, for taking the time to talk with me. I know you have so many other stories and so much other wisdom, and I really enjoy hearing your stories and hearing how you're doing. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me for the podcast.
Well, I live with my daughter. That big old gray building over there is my studio. She calls it. I call it my crash pad. But got plenty of backyard to put up a tent in. So whenever you come around, a lot of more of those stories would really come out, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know in person is
right.
It's special for sure. And you're in Yuma, right? You're in...
Right.
You're not near the Hopi reservation, correct?
I'm about 5 hours from it, depending on traffic. Yeah. But and of course, right now that place is in a really tight lockdown.
Yeah.
I'm almost thinking it's going to almost be impossible to get in there, even when they lift, the restrictions on those villages.
Just to protect, because it seems like there's a big outbreak in that area of the COVID.
I think a lot more than what's being told. But, because I have cousins and stuff that live up there. But, I mean, like, even right now, even from those, like, I can't go up there right now. I can't go up there. Because I'm not a permanent resident up there. Mm-hmm. So there's Hopis that are living all over that right now we can't go home. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you see the population, I mean, if you take 200 out of that population, that's a big. You might as well take a quarter or 3/3 of the population out of them. Out of the out of the amount of Hopis that are living on that reservation. So yeah, they're really being, which I think they should be, tight on, what's going in and out. They let you travel on the main road, but you can't go off into the villages.
Yeah, my partner and I were in southern New Mexico this winter, or this spring during the height of at least the beginning of the pandemic, and then we didn't really go anywhere for a while, but then my partner's family lives in Durango, Colorado, and at some point we decided to move our locations, and it was definitely like having to drive through. There's checkpoints and just things to consider, maybe going around and being respectful of that kind of boundary that they're holding in that area, just to try to keep the COVID down, especially with all the elders and yeah.
Yep. And at my age, 65, I'm considered an elder. Can you believe that?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. All right, sweet one.
All right. Thanks, John, so much. And you have a good rest of your day.
Anytime I can help you, any questions, please let me know.
Will do. Take care, John.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hey, y'all. You just listened to a conversation with the artist John Mahkewa. And the music for this podcast episode was by West of Rhone, and the song was called Little Flower. I met that band back when I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, and they have since moved to the West Coast, and I've always really enjoyed their music, so I was excited to feature their music in this episode, and hopefully some more episodes in the future. And with that, just wanted to say thanks for listening, and until next time, y'all. This episode of the Ground Shots podcast was produced by Opia Creative. Our music is by Mother Marrow. If you'd like to help us continue to make this audio project a reality, consider becoming a monthly supporter on our Patreon page at patreon.com/ofsedgeandsalt, where we have rewards like entry into patron-only giveaways, additional audio interviews, extra educational content, and much more. You can also share our work and give us a review on iTunes. Visit our website at ofsedgeandsalt.com to see what else we're up to and a log of our episodes when they come out. Check out our show notes for information about how to find us and our guests. Until next time, y'all, thanks for listening.